what I've got for you is going to be the story of how I broke my nose. In fact, I'm going to tell you how I broke my nose twice. It's not the same event, like it's not like I broke my nose twice in one sitting. Ow. But I'll tell you both times I've broken my nose. And you guys can tell me which the more exciting of these events is. Spoiler alert, I already know the answer. So here's the deal. Part of the story, Sarah doesn't actually even know. Because the story actually kind of begins, if we want to stretch the term beginning to its fullest extent. It kind of begins quite a bit before I broke my nose. And it begins with this guy named Nick, who I met way back in high school. Sarah, do you know about Nick?
I don't think so.
Nick was a funny guy. Nick was a punk. Nick was like a real punk, though. The kind of punk.
Is his name Mohawk?
Yeah!
Okay, I've heard of
You've heard about Nick.
Oh, wait, I think I know this part of the story.
Perhaps. So here's the deal. Nick was a real punk. He had the kind of like 2 foot high.
Wow, these guys are doing so much
had
damage.
like glue in his hair mohawk, like the real mohawks. He would use Elmer's glue and paint to make his mohawk. And hey, what's up? You guys, you're all up in my
Where's the
shit.
rest of our team?
Over here, keeping them on the bridge.
Okay. We're the attacker, though.
Yeah, well, we need to, I guess, get past the bridge. So anyway, the, Nick.
Why am I on this side?
we need to get through. We have to put shit down. We already have. It's just not loaded over here. So.
Oh, it's already down?
Apparently so.
That explains a lot.
Thank you. So, the Nick, he has he was just this new student, and I was kind of elected, this is back in high school, I was elected to kind of like be his friend, like show him around and do all that stuff. Great, you know, whatever, I don't care, whatever. And I was so lucky to have had that opportunity, because Nick was dying of liver failure in high school because of all the drinking. And that's pretty young to be dying of liver failure. It's just his lifestyle. So, I think it's okay to judge him. I think it's okay to judge him for that. I think that's okay. So, he was like, I think I was getting too friendly with him, and he had kind of like a Ron Swanson approach with that, because what he would eventually do is be like, hey, I'm gonna cut you off. You know about like bananas, right? And these are the fruit that we would later, the intelligent among us later call nans, because of how I revolutionized bananas. That's a whole different story. The nans. He would be like, hey, so you like bananas? My brother loves bananas. Here, check out my phone. And this is back when I was in high school, so this is a 2 megapixel phone. You know, it's a piece of shit. But you can make out a guy going, "Orr," holding a nan and trying to block a photo from being taken. He's like, that's my brother. He fucking loves him. And I'm like, oh, no. This is unrelated to that. It's just that now that we've revolutionized bananas, it's just important to really, you know, use the terminology when possible. So, he's like, yeah, he loves bananas. He loves nans. And, anyway, here's my brother. Here's a whole banonk of nans separated in. Do you see what this is? And I'm like, no, dude, I don't, because it's a 2 megapixel camera, because it's like 2007. And he's like, oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, those are condoms. And I'm like, what? Why are there condoms on the nans? And he's like, well, my brother loves bananas. I mentioned that. And I'm like,
Penguin gets it.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I just really don't want these things to be connected. And he's like, yeah, well, they are. Because here's the next series of photos. And it's him taking pictures of himself with a mirror, shoving the condomed bananas inside of himself. laughing with a shit-eating grin, no pun intended. And he has a just this smirk on his fucking face. And to this day, I actually don't think it was any kind of like a gay thing. I think this is just like he recognized that the world would see this as gay and be uncomfortable. He is this is just who we're dealing with. And he had just done this with each of those nans. And the last photo was him taking a picture. He's like, yeah, I sent all these to my brother, and it was of his brother's phone, and he'd shoved it inside of himself. And he'd sent all these to his brother to torture him. Well, yes. So here's the deal. He sent all these to his brother just to antagonize him, I'm sure, because who doesn't want to see where the bananas have been and where your phone is? All these things you put up next to your face. Love it.
Hey.
I don't know what this means.
They liked your 1v1.
So the deal is, I don't think this guy was gay, and it's gonna come up here in a second, because eventually we have, you know, some other class, you know, some other day, of course, and I'm like, wow, gee, thanks for showing me all this shit. This is really, really cool. Really good. And when he like gets back from the bathroom and he like sits down because we're sitting next to each other, and he's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, oh, it's going good. And then eventually, this guy named Nick, who's not in our classroom, different Nick. There are two Nicks in this scenario because Nick is a fairly common name, and this is a real life event, so it just happens. Deal with it. Now, this other Nick shows up, and he's like, motherfucker, and like just starts screaming. And our teacher, Mrs. Bash, is just like, Nick, what the fuck? No, get out of here. Oh my god, you can't be in here screaming and shit, whatever. And he's like, motherfucker, where is that? And he's dropping the real F-bomb in an accusatory tone. By the way, welcome all the people randomly joining me. Somebody redeemed some sense. That's my channel points for a good story. And we're getting into it. So, Nick 2, we'll call him, is very angry, and he's being escorted out. And I'm like, what the fuck? Was he talking to you? And Nick 1, the guy next to me, is like, yeah, I think he might have been. And I'm like, what the fuck is he mad about? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I just don't want to push it, I guess. And basically, we find out later, because he's like, you know what it might have been? I think I know what it might have been. And I'm like, please share. He does. He's like, I think it was because I went to go take a piss, and like I saw that somebody was like grunting one out in the stall with like super wide legs, you know, and like so his foot was right up against the wall, and so, you know, I was already starting my piss, but it's like, I got plenty left, so I just started peeing on his leg under the stall wall. And I'm like, Nick, the fuck? And he's like, oh yeah, but like that's just hilarious, right? That's really funny. Well, he didn't think it was like so funny, so he got up and was super angry, and I was like, oh shit, that's Nick too. He's huge. Well, what do? I can't, say exactly what I would have done, because I'm not sure I'd be pissing on a guy's leg in the first place, but Nick 1 decides that, well, obviously, you run over to the stall door, and when the huge Nick gets his pants up and gets out, he's super, super angry, you grab both sides of his face, and you kiss him deeply. And that's what he did. And again, it wasn't like, I truly don't think he was gay. I think this is just because he recognized how uncomfortable this kind of behavior made everyone else. And we could all learn a thing or two from this Nick. So he kisses him deeply, and apparently this stupefied him long enough that he was able to get away and came back to class. I'm assuming, thinking it was all over. But that's where we saw Nick 2 barge in. Okay, all right. So Years later, this is where the fun begins, so to speak. Years later, we have wow. I'm trying to think about like where to even start with this one. So years later, I am on a public transportation. I live near Portland, Oregon, and I'm in Portland, and I'm on their rail system, and it's fucking freezing. It's actually the windiest night I've ever experienced in Portland. Hey, how you doing? I'm telling a story here. Somebody redeemed some points, and we're getting into the weeds of it here. So, we have this windy night. It's fucking cold. It actually would end up snowing this night, and if you live in Portland or know the area well, you know that does not fucking happen here. It's cold. And, I am really, I'm not dressed for the weather. It was a dumb move, but I kind of thought I was going to a concert. Who needs it? You know, it's going to be plenty warm. Portland is an old city. And the concert I was going to was for it was kind of like the last stand of this one concert hall that a lot of punks played at. And it was a farewell party, more or less, for it. It's a real old city, like I said. This particular building, this concert venue, was the first floor of a large structure that was being condemned entirely because there was only one way in and one way out. That's a huge fucking fire hazard. And the building was the Pearl. The venue was the Pearl. And the Pearl was being shut down. These punks were there, and there were a lot of them. In fact, I show up, I was pretty skinny, and I was wearing just like a band t-shirt from some band that these guys didn't care for or know about or whatever. And I was kind of the odd one out. I was actually getting a lot of looks. People are giving me sideways fucking looks here. I'm there with a couple of my friends who were a part of the Peace Club. And the Peace Club is not what it seems, necessarily. And it's actually the root of a whole nother story you guys will hear later. And I'm there. I don't actually have any business being there. I don't like hardcore live punk music. It actually sounds just like noise to me. I feel like I'm 80. Would you turn that shit down? It's just a ruckus. It is. If you've heard what I've heard, you know what I'm talking about. It's just people playing as loud as they can, as fast as they can, and it's nonsense. I digress. The folks here are here for the music and the culture. And they're all just kind of like very, very skeptical of me and my friend Haley, who is this little stick. I don't know if you guys remember, those of you who were alive in the 90s. I know Erica wasn't yet, but that's okay. We can't hold it against her. Heroin chic as a fashion statement. This chick made those women look healthy. She was a good friend of mine, athlete, super. She's a rail. And she had a regular old sweatshirt on, fine. And I just had like a little hoodie and just the band t-shirt and ripped jeans. No business wearing what either of us are wearing out there. We get to this thing, and people are actually standing in the way of the door. These two big dudes are like, I don't think you are in the right place. Actively keeping me from going inside. And I'm like, no, I want in. We want for the show. And the guys are like, I just don't think. And then of all fucking people, Nick charges out, still smoking. He's like, you motherfucker, Lou, you crazy son of a bitch, how'd you get here? And I'm like, oh, Nick, the fuck? And he's like, hey, they're cool. So my three friends and I, we all come in, and he's like, wow, I can't believe you made it. This is amazing. What the fuck? How'd you hear about this? And I'm like, dude, actually, It's nuts. I heard about this from Scrotum. Scrotum is a man. That is Scrotum's real name. Scrotum is actually part of a different story that you guys will hear about at a different time. Scrotum is his real name. I digress. I'm talking with Nick now, and he's like, so you guys, we're actually up third. And they were like, of course, because it's a punk band, these guys don't fucking sleep. They just drink till they fall unconscious in their own puke. So he's like, wow, you get in here, man. Like, this is amazing. And we get in there and it's just packed. But this place is clearly a fucking fire hazard. The only lights in the place are Christmas lights, hundreds by my guess. Hundreds of different streams all put together. And they have these retired stereo systems from like the 60s that are lining the back wall. And that's basically what there is to sit on. Everything else is just open floor, stage, and then the main attractions up there. And what we've got is a band I've never heard of and I cannot understand because it's just with just extremely fast. I mean, this is a real punk rock show. These guys have like the leather vests, the skin tight handmade Ramones pants. I don't even know what to call those. And then they have like all the nickel studs pushed through the leather. And I am freezing. I'm already fucking freezing. So I'm like, okay, you guys, I'm gonna go mosh because if I don't, my limbs are gonna fall off. So I go down and I just start moshing right away. And Nick's like, yeah! And just like doesn't even like take a cigarette out. He's just like ready to go. And he's like, yeah, you son of a bitch, let's go. So we start moshing. We're having an okay time. I'm just trying to stay warm, and the burning starts. I start to feel this burning because I give my hoodie to my friend Haley, which is this twig. And I'm like, well, she's gonna die. I only might die. So I give my hoodie to Haley. And I go back, I go into the mosh pit, and we're just having a good time, mosh pit. I can't hear the music, and honestly, I hate it. But I'm there, and it's whatever. But the burning starts, and the burning keeps going. The burning actually doesn't ever stop the entire night. It only gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And after like the second band goes off, I actually go back to the speakers where Haley is slowly becoming a popsicle. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? And she's like, what? Freezing, and the music is so loud. But the burning is going on. And I didn't know what it was at the time. I would later find out that it was actually a nickel allergy. I didn't know I was allergic to nickel. But I was in here moshing with all these dweebs who have all these nickel things pushed through their jackets, and we were going at it for hours. And I was grinding into all their studs. Apparently, I'm allergic to nickel. I had no idea. So I'm freezing, I'm having an allergic reaction all over my fucking arms, extremely uncomfortable, and Nick's band comes on. Okay, I'm not actually going to leave this thing early. I'm just not. Because it was a time in my life, it was just, yeah, I'm ready for the adventure. And the deal is, Nick's band was named TSS, and you're like, that sounds familiar. That acronym sounds familiar. It is Toxic Shock Syndrome. And they have actually a pretty long set of, and it's beautiful. I imagine that's a punk ballad. Point is, I get in there and I start moshing like crazy, and it's actually a damn good time because I'm starting to lose any sense of who or what I am because I'm so cold and I'm just so fucking it's terrible. Anyway, I get shoved really, really hard, and the natural reaction is just to kind of do one of these, well, this elbow right here starts the business because I end up elbowing this guy in the chest, and I can't communicate with anybody around me, but the guy on the outside of the ring is like, what the fuck, bro? What the fuck? And I'm sure he didn't say bro, because I can't imagine Punk saying that. But the point is, he's saying what the fuck, and I can only see the mouse, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, I got pushed. And his friend is just mugging me right next to the guy who I bumped into. It's not even the guy I hit, it's the friend of the guy I hit. And he's just like, and I'm like, oh no, I got, and it's over. He just comes at me, punches me in the face. I could hear the cracks in my nose. I knew it was broken immediately. And if anybody's ever been really hit in the face, you know that you actually do see stars. The whole Looney Tunes shit with the stars going around like that, I don't know if it's like that, but you actually see stars. That's where that comes from. It's not just cartoons. You actually see stars when you get hit that hard. And these people fight. They drink and they fight. And see, Meth knows. And this guy gave me a good one. And to my credit, I only took one step back. Wasn't even down. And I'm like kind of coming to, because I was not expecting to get hit in the face. And what's Mike Tyson's famous saying, Andrew? Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the nose. Yeah. I'm telling you, I didn't know who the fuck I was. This is not a story of my brave courageousness. This is just a thing that happened to me. So, I get punched, and I'm like, actually stupefied. And the guys are like, kind of looking at each other, and like they kind of elbow each other, and they turn, and they start to beeline it through the crowd backward. And it's at this point, I'm like, hey! Yeah, that's right! I didn't go down! That's probably why you're running away! I'm coming after you! One of those smart moves you hear about. And, apparently, I start charging after these people through the crowd. And I'm pushing people out of the way, and all of a sudden, poof, my twig of a friend Haley is in front of me. And she's there in my sweatshirt, looking terrified. And I'm like, Haley, move! And she's dragging me into place with her 80-pound body. And I'm like, no. And she's not letting go. She's hanging on. And I'm like, no, I gotta, those guys, they punched me in the, and she puts her hand on my chest and holds it up for me to see, and it's just red. Her whole hand is just, it's running down her arm. And I was like, huh? And I was like, are you hurt? Oh my God. And she's like, puts the other hand on there and shows me both hands just red running down her. Oh, it's me. That's what they're running from. It was the fact that I was spewing blood, but everything was so cold and irritated and shocked that I had no idea I was fountaining blood down. And it's at this point I start to feel woozy. I don't have like a blood issue, but it had been probably 4 minutes of this streaming, because I was on blood thinners because of the heart surgeries. Just flying out of my fucking face. Eventually I go get cleaned up, and she's, doing the whole heroin in the story, helping me out. And this is exactly right. Yeah. And so like it wasn't because I was some big tough dude that didn't go down after the one punch they decided to give me. It was because I was a guy who was still on my feet spewing blood. Yeah, that's why they left. Anyway, she eventually helps clean me up, and we go back, and we're sitting on the speakers, and I'm lightheaded because the blood never actually stops. And I'm freezing, and I have a nickel allergy. And it's at this point, if anybody's ever had their nose broken, the headache starts. Because I promise you, you don't know what it feels like to have your nose broken. You might have had broken bones, you might have gotten bopped in the nose, but I promise you, you don't know what it feels like. And it is a whole experience unto itself. And so I'm sitting up there, and I'm like coming in and out. This is not a fun time, and I'm just sitting on the speakers right next to Haley, and like, apparently the headline song of Toxic Shock Syndrome, the band my friend Nick is in, who is playing, apparently their headlining song is called Motherfuck the Police. I don't know it, because again, only just sounds like that to me. So, I do hear, though, and you have to believe me, because there was no one else there who can vouch for me but Haley, and we don't talk anymore. She has children and a husband and a life. You have to believe me. I look over and see a midget pimp. I'm only assuming he's a pimp just because of the extremely flamboyant hat he's wearing. He's black and has this sketchy-ass goatee, and he has with him the two ugliest prostitutes I've ever seen in my life. He is, however, the single loudest human being I've ever experienced. He whistles with noise that cuts through all the other noise, the crowd, the shitty speakers, everything cuts through it like a knife. It is a whistle, just cuts through it, and I hear him, yeah, yeah, motherfuck the police, yeah, yeah, screaming that louder. I can't, for the life of me, I'm a loud guy, obviously. I'm a loud guy, and I can't communicate with Haley sitting next to me, but this midget pimp whistles and cuts through it like he was the only noise there ever was. Anyway, I don't smoke, but I basically went outside and smoked a pack of cigarettes because I couldn't deal with anything. Blood is still just happening. But to them, this is actually a redeeming feature to the punks because punk world. And I'm just like, I've got like a 40 and like just cigarettes and I'm just trying to get through. Anyway, that is the story of the first time I broke my nose. The second time I broke my nose, it was Thanksgiving, and my mom was hosing off the porch, and there was a bunch of dawn and stuff, and I'd returned home, and, I was super fit, and, I charge up the back porch stairs, because I'm home, and it feels good, and I'm like, yeah, Mom, this is great. So I run up the little two concrete stairs, and I slip on the first step, and I drill my nose into the door. So, those are the two times. Those are the two times I broke my nose. And so you have to decide for yourself which one is better.